Okay, Council, if you would light up your mics, please, so we can all be on the record. Any questions on agenda or items on consent at this point? Going once, going twice. Any councilor concerns we'd like to get out?
There were some questions on the street sweeping issue that we answered. I don't know if anybody has any additional questions. If not, the staff that are here that may not have to stay. If you don't intend to pull it off consent, we can let them fly away.
I asked some questions, and I'm not clear if those are additional questions you're referring to.
Well, Councilor Ackerval had some, and you had some, so I
just for everyone's information, experience with our prior contractor was that when cars were parked on the street, they got nowhere close to anything. They just went around it all. And at the end of dead-end streets, they kind of quit 30 or 40 feet before they should have because it was easier to turn around. So those kinds of things. And then the ongoing problem we had, in spite of multiple requests, were that they would sweep the street before business hours when the parking spaces were all full of cars. And they rarely did that in spite of multiple requests. And the problem is that in an area that is also adjacent residences, if the contract says they'll start sweeping at 4 a.m., that may not be totally satisfactory either. So how do we have a means of negotiating this under this agreement?
So within the contract, one thing that we wrote in. So Mayor, within the contract, one of the things
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Martin Montalvo, Operations Manager for Public Works.
Thank you.
So within the contract, we wrote in a stipulation that within the first 10 days of the contract being enacted, they have to work with us to develop an operations plan. So that's when we provide them maps with all of the routes that we prefer. They take a look at it, say this is what we can do operationally, and then we define for them known problem areas and known issues, and we work together to try and resolve those. So we have the list of concerns that you've brought. Those are on our list to talk to them about. We've already spoken in depth with a few of them. And then we also have several other issues that are just operational that they'll make us aware that's unique to their equipment.
All right, that should cover it as far as I can see. Councilor Linville.
I just had one question, and that was on the map that was included in the packet. So is that map negotiated or renegotiated, or is it kind of set that that's where the service will?
That's the map for the service term for the first year of the contract. Okay. The contract renews annually. We can update that throughout the contract, add some components or delete some components, but that also goes towards the amount of time that we have allotted for the overall street sweeping for the year.
Does it pretty much mirror what we've done in the past?
There's some additions. So we added, I believe the rough number is about 15 lane miles over the last contract. And there was a significant change on the bike lane miles. Okay. Numbers off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you.
So the volume, but the frequency and...
Frequency is still essentially the same. Okay. And outside of adding in some new sections, it's the same footprint that we've had in the last few years.
We do have the right under the contract to terminate it at any time if we're not happy. And we also, the mayor asked about alternative disposal locations that might save some money. And we did put language in the contract that if we are able to find an alternative method or place for them to dispose of the debris, that the contract amount will be adjusted.
And we're exploring that very scenario with Republic Services, so.
Yeah.
But we're not tied to paying that amount. If that deal somehow manages to get pushed across the finish line, then that we can just reduce it by that amount.
Yep. We've been working with the contractor for street sweeping, make him completely aware of this alternative. And they've agreed if it becomes available, that they're open to renegotiation of the contract.
Okay. Councilor
Lehan?
So is the schedule predictable? We know what streets are going on and what days?
That's one of the things that we have to define within that first 10 days of operation period development.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so then is there a way to communicate that to neighborhoods?
It's not stipulated within the contract, but that is one thing that we're trying to get to with this round. We've already met with them once. Delora Kerber and I have met with them. And one of the things that we want to start doing is defining routes with the ops plan, and then we get a daily email from them that says, today we're in route number 2. And that gives us the capability to publish something through our communications methods to let the community know we're working in route 2, route 3, route 4, and just publish it so people know we're in their area.
Yeah, because I have a number of neighbors that I know usually park on the street, but would park elsewhere in their driveway or wherever if they knew the sweeper was coming.
Yeah, even if we can get to, we're going to sweep the third and first week of the month on these days and these routes.
Yeah.
But we do want to be a little bit more proactive with getting the information out.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a consent item. Unless somebody feels the need to talk about it in the formal meeting, it would need to be removed from consent. Okay?
Thank you for your time.
Good, thank you. The counselor concerns item, I guess, is the other question. I asked a question about the Wilsonville Road street crossing bollards, and I guess engineering is looking into that.
Yeah, did you not get your response from Zach Weigel?
I got a generalized response. I'm not clear if that's it.
Well, the response, the way I read it was, yes, they did take that all into account, and that, yes, it has to be that way, and there's limited options to meet the ADA standards.
Just from a layman's perspective, they're weird. They're sitting right in the middle of the sidewalk, so if you walk down blindfolded, you'd run right into them. So.
One thing that Zach did convey to me later, he is going to send the engineer who's been working on this project out there on Wednesday to measure everything and make sure that it's all
field tested.
Exactly, because they did have constraints, but by the same token, they do need to meet ADA standards, which are very strict, and so we're going to double check that to make sure.
Again, layman's perspective, it seems weird that if there is a rule that they don't all look the same. One is like this, the next one's different, third one's different. I mean, they're just location-wise, they're just kind of.
Only thing I can tell you about that, Mayor, is that the ADA overrides everything else. So I assume that when they did the design, that was the principle that they had to adhere to first, and then everything else kind of fell out from there. But he is going to field test it.
All right, so
check.
that's enough. That'd be fine. Anything else for concerns? All right. I guess the one thing I would add is there's still a lot of residential streets with leaves on the street, so I don't know how soon the sweeping starts or what we do with that.
Well, the current street sweeper is still supposed to be sweeping, but Martin is here, so he can answer that.
Mark Montalvo, Public Works. So the street sweeper is currently fulfilling the obligation under their contract. The new contract does not officially take place until January 1st, and they are prepared to start on that date if we need them.
Okay.
So if there's an area of particular concern, please send us an email, and I'll be sure to have staff take a look at it.
Thank you very much.
I guess I can also let you know that the repairs on Day Road are done.
Oh.
Even the intersection.
Really?
And we hope it lasts, hopefully, 3 years.
Okay. We'll all join in hoping that.
Yes, we will.
Because it's often a problem. Let's jump in then to our work session items with, starting with water rates, if we could.
Well, good evening. Kathy Rodacher, Finance Director, and I have with me Doug Gabbard from FCS. And we have his detailed 58-slide PowerPoint presentation should we need additional information, but I'm hoping that we can work off from the slides that I put together here. First of all, I do have to apologize. I realize that I put the wrong descriptions on my staff report. It didn't correlate with how my tables were laid out. So I do apologize for that, throwing in a little bit more confusion to a very confusing subject. So I apologize for that. So first of all, one of the things that we had come up at the last meeting was does our residential winter average look like? This is a 13-year graph that shows in 2006, we had approximately 3,500 customers and a winter average of 5.74. And in 2019, we had over 5,400 residential customers and a winter average of 4.64. So we've increased or decreased the average by 19% while increasing the number of customers by 54%. So I think it shows what a difference the new homes with all the, water efficient appliances and things really are having a pretty significant impact. So this is a table that shows the different rate structures that we are proposing. Option 1 is a fixed base, which is based on per meter charge. Option 1 includes a portion of the peak fees in the fixed base charge. We have option 2, where it's a variable base, and here you can see that the base rates are based on customer type versus the size of the meters. So every type has a different base rate based on as per the meter size. This option also includes a portion of the peak fees into the fixed rates. And then we have option 3. This is one that we added since our last meeting. This reflects the current philosophy that we have with our existing rate structure, where there is no peak fees in the fixed charges. So the peak fees are all a part of the consumption charge. So the people who are using more water would be paying for the peak charges versus sharing that with everyone who has a meter. So that's the difference between these 3 types.
Question? In option 1, if you just take an example, the first one, for instance, at $20.40, and then option 3 at $16.50,
9 cents.
59 cents, the differential between the $16.59 and the $20.40 is the proportion of peak fees contained in option 1?
Correct.
Okay, please go ahead. Councilor Linville?
So at the last meeting, Councilor Lehan's question was, do any of these options reflect an incentive for conservation? And so is option 3, that is what option 3 reflects?
Yes, it best reflects what the current philosophy of our rate structure.
Okay.
So where you're paying for, if you use more money, then you're paying for those peak charges.
Use more water.
Okay? So the rate comparison sheet here, what we did is we actually went through the last billing cycle and pulled an average usage, a low usage, and a high usage customer for every type of customers that we have. And then we compared it to what the existing current rate was so that we can see the percentage differences that each option has. As you can tell, for our low consumption users, there is a significant decrease in both the variable base fee and for the option 3. So if they're using the 2 units or less, then it's going to be a slight decrease than what they're used to paying.
In single family?
Correct, for single families.
Okay.
This is residential. And then the high usage, they, once again, since, the more the peak fees are in the variable charge, they see a little higher increase than just our average user. We did the same thing for multifamily. I thought this one was kind of interesting. It was $254 for, they use 64 units of water for five apartments. So they use quite a bit of water for this particular apartment complex, where our low users only used 10 units, and they were splitting that between 4 apartments. But it kind of shows how we can't really, say how each apartment's going to, how it's going to affect, because it really depends on the usage patterns. Some don't have irrigation meters, so those are being, run through the regular main meter. So I thought that was kind of an interesting.
I agree, it's kind of interesting, and what jumps out at me is that lower per capita use in the 10 unit, who is actually doing a better job of conserving, is going to have a 32% jump in their rate, whereas the 64 unit that is using a lot more water for whatever reason actually gets a reduction. And that kind of seems to me to be counter to the argument of let's conserve and let's charge people that don't conserve.
Yeah, that's having that peak charge, a portion of that peak charge in the base fee. So their consumption fee isn't as high per unit because some of that peak fee is being captured into the base fee. Mm-hmm. So that's the big difference between these, is do you want the part of the peak fees to be paid by everyone, or do you want the peak fees to be paid, by the people who are using more water?
Councilor Lindblom.
So, looking again at what you were talking about in the lower and the multifamily, it appears that the option that gives the low user the most benefit and incentive, again, is option 3. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So we did the same thing for our commercial users. You can see the same issue where, the low-end users were seeing a large increase. Once we saw this is when we said, okay, we probably should throw in a third option, based on our existing structure, because, I think you would have a hard time, telling people that are conserving their water that they're going to be paying more. And you can see here that the high users in the commercial were actually having lower bills because the peak charge was being spread out through all of the commercial users. Industrial, pretty much the same thing. The small user was going to have a larger percentage increase versus the ones who had higher consumption. And then irrigation was kind of a mixed bag across, but like I said, option 3, reflects the philosophy that we have used for a number of years, it's served the city well. But if you're looking to have some kind of different approach where we spread those fees, the peak fees out amongst all customers, then we would need to look at either option 1 or option 2. And that's how it works.
Okay. Can you remind us in very few words the rationale for the option 2 that staff has brought forward as a change of some significance to the approach we have been using for a period of years, which you've captured in option 3, right?
Correct. Can you want to answer that question, why we brought option 2?
The option 2.
Could I ask you to put your mic on and identify yourself, please?
I'm Doug Gabbard with FCS Group. Which option 2?
Option 2 is your option 1.
Let's call it the varied
The
or the
variable.
unified, yeah.
So the variable base option, the option with many different base charges for each, or a different base charge for each customer class, was our first presentation to you of options, just based upon a default use of the M1 standards. So it was,
I don't know what that means. I don't know what the M1 standard is, or,
sure, I'd be happy to share that with you. The M1 is the manual put out by the American Water Works Association that provides standard industrial guidance for the development of water rates.
okay.
So, but it was a big change from what
Yeah.
we're used to seeing.
So I've been asking a lot of the questions, and I apologize for taking so long to figure this out, but to me, I really don't want to have to explain to somebody why their base fee went up 157% or 48% when they're using the same amount of water. I'm not sure that I grasp the upside or the advantage to doing that over what we're doing. And I also think that having a structure in which higher usage is evident in higher bills as your usage goes up is an easy to understand and does help incentivize people to try to use less water. Trying to explain all this other stuff when I haven't even been able to understand it for several meetings, to me, is of limited help in
Yeah.
moving this forward. That's just how it feels to me. Council, please tell us how anybody has a viewpoint here. Councilor Ackerville.
Well, I would wonder if I'm going to call it the variable rate option, if that would be difficult to administer too, because there are many moving parts on that. So not just in describing it to the community, but also in
Just building
the administration
Building
of
the
it.
rate structure for that in our financial system is like, oh, gosh.
Right. I wonder if there's something to consider that. And I'm recalling, because we've been talking about this for a while now, a couple months, but I'm recalling that at our initial conversation, part of the motivation to addressing this now is the change in the
Yes.
financial system. And
And
we need
making it
something that will
simpler.
work without
Yeah.
having to do a plug-in or add-on to the system
Correct.
that will then need to be updated over time and cause further
Right.
heartache and heartburn.
You're correct.
So I think avoiding that would be helpful in accomplishing one of our initial goals. I felt that the table that we had where we got the percent change from our current rate structure based on the average low, high user, I felt that table was really helpful in kind of understanding where the movement is happening. And I did see, because, as you have described it, option 3 follows the philosophy that we have had. So we're seeing less change in that option. But I think the largest change, the segment, I guess, of the community that would see the largest change under that option, option 3, was the low users residential. And they, in fact, saw a decrease of 19%.
Correct.
And that was the segment that had the largest change. So to have something moving in that direction is maybe easier to explain to the community than having the large increases. So I saw some benefit there. One of my questions that I had, and, we were able to have some discussion prior, was the notification of some of the big users in the community and what the timeline for that would be.
Yeah.
Because
that
as
would
we've
be-
been talking
yeah.
about it, I don't know how much everybody else is anticipating changes coming too, and I think.
If we do get direction, then we would, immediately start working on getting that information out and do a Boonesbury Messenger, article. And, the public, it is a public hearing to adopt new rates, so it will be noticed. And so get the word out that these are coming. We haven't had a rate increase since 2017, so, people have gotten pretty used to these particular rates. The rate stream that was recommended had 3% increases for the next 3 years after this. Is that correct?
That's correct. Overall, if they were applied across the board.
So that's what we would recommend, that we increase this new rate structure with 3%.
And then kind of set it on
Yeah.
this track.
Right.
Right.
And
Because I think that's important that people, making changes is one thing, but nobody likes to pay more money, but knowing and being able to plan of, that you're going to pay more money is
Yeah.
helpful to people.
Especially true
And
for
when-
our high-volume users.
Right? Yeah.
And when we do have a rate stream like that adopted, we put the full adopted rate stream on the back of the bill, so that people, if they look
That's
at the back
important.
of the bill, would have that information
Yeah.
for them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, those are good details to know, because I think that's important for
Yeah.
everyone in planning going forward.
Anybody else?
Go ahead.
I wasn't sure where that 157% came from. Why is that so big?
Because it's going from the $33 dollars up to $86. And the big part of that, if we go back, what size was that? Do you remember what size meter the industrial was?
Is that a-
If you come back here, you see how we have one rate here, but when you go over to the industrial, you can see the difference where it's $33.18 here. If it was an industrial customer with the same meter size, it would be $244.74 because of the rate structure, the base fee, including the peak charges in it. So that's why it made such a big difference. Like here for our 1-inch meter, every customer type under the variable option would have a different base fee, which when we presented this at the first time, everybody pretty much said, that's not really where we want to go. So that's why we've come up with different options since that time, because of that big swing.
I think in that scenario, right, there would be some savings in the usage rate.
Correct.
But if you're not using that much water, then you don't realize
Right.
that much savings. So that you just get, instead, you're just hit with the big increase on the base.
Yes, that is
right?
correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Is option one kind of a middle ground between option two and option three? Because some of the
Correct.
peak is included in there, so if you wanted to assign some of the peak costs, but not the full load, you would look at option one, and you've got some increases, 28%, 23%, 20%, those different categories. So you still have a significant piece there that then we need to try to educate people as to why they're there, or the other option is just to go with 3 and just, when you use more water, you're going to pay more. And, if you got a 1-inch meter, you're going to pay the cost for a 1-inch meter, whether you're a commercial or a industrial, or, if you got a 3/4-inch meter, you're residential, or if you're commercial, it won't matter. You got a 3/4 meter, you pay the base for a 3/4 meter. So what direction would we like to give to staff to move forward with this? We've been hashing on it for a while. I'm pretty comfortable with option 3 myself,
I am too.
but
I am too. It seems to me that it's the one option that where it allows our citizens to have some control over what they pay, which I think is a good thing, even if you are in a multifamily situation. There is some incentive for you to conserve, to lower your payments. Otherwise, that peak is spread across low income, high income. It doesn't differentiate, and there's no way to change that. So I'm comfortable with option 3.
okay. Who else?
That's fine. Let's go with 3.
All right, so is that direction to staff then, that we would like you to develop option 3 and bring it back to
Can I
us?
do my happy dance? Yes, I will bring forward option 3 when we can get it on the schedule with a public hearing and all of that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for
very
all your
much.
work.
Appreciate it.
All right, Willamette Falls Locks up next, Mr. O.
Good evening, Mayor, City Councilors. Mark Ottenet, Public Government Affairs Director. And tonight we'll have a brief discussion on the Willamette Falls Locks Commission and their proposed recommendation to the legislature to create a public corporation and to also request continued ongoing support from local governments. Basically, and Councilor Linville is your city council representative to the commission, who has now been able to participate in, I believe, 2 of the commission meetings.
With the commission soon to sunset.
Yes, most ironically, technically it would expire by June 30th, which is when Senate Bill 256 authorization would run out, but presumably the Commission has voted to recommend that legislation be brought to the Joint Ways and Means Committee to form the Willamette Locks Authority to take ownership of the locks from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and then basically to execute a 2-phase business plan. Right now, the Locks Commission staff in Clackamas County, which has been helping to organize the effort, are requesting support from local governments for phase 1 of the business plan. Basically, phase 1 would be overseeing the construction and repair to get the locks operational and running for the public. They anticipate it would be a 3 to 5 year period of time. In essence, you have before you in your packet a letter from the chair of the commission, Mayor Russ Axelrod, requesting that the city continue its current level of support, which has been $7,000 a fiscal year for the past 2 fiscal years to support the work of the commission. In the letter, the mayor does also request that you consider ongoing support, also in the form of letters of support to the commission indicating your support, a letter to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means encouraging funding. And basically, the business plan is looking to the local governments, the county, the cities, private industry to fund the initial period of the public corporation operations. Then the bulk of the money for capital repairs would come from other people's money, namely $2.5 million, $2.6 million from the federal government to undertake seismic repairs at the locks. And then they're lobbying the state for $14 million for for all of the repairs that need to be made and to create a maintenance sinking fund. At this time, the governor's budget has proposed $7,000. Excuse me, 7 million, pardon about that. That's what I got. Ours is 7,000, sorry about that. And so basically, it's going to be a bit of a lift, but even if they got $7 million in this session and maybe $7 million in the next session, that would certainly be more than plenty to get the locks program advancing forward. I think I'm trying to make this a quick summary. I don't know if there's any other questions or points there that you might be thinking of.
Councilor Linville, did you want to add anything from your perspective?
I did. I thought it would be helpful for us in our decision-making to know at least what some of the other government commitments have been, those that have already taken this question to their councils. So at this point, what we know is that Metro, Lake Oswego, Gladstone, Newburgh, Milwaukee, and us have not acted on this, and those communities were supporting have supported in the past. The other jurisdictions that were not previously providing funding have not, at least have not responded yet. So what we have so far is that Clackamas County has agreed to $40,000 per year for 3 years. The Grand Ronde tribes have agreed to $10,000 per year for up to 5 years. Westland Council approved $15,000 per year for 2 years and a minimum of $10,000 per year after that. Oregon City approved $10,000 per year for up to 5 years. In the letter from the chair of the commission, they are asking for $7,000 or more from us to continue for the 3 to 5 years. And so that's all we know, at least at this point. And again, that's operations money. And then they're also, they're anticipating, and I think and hoping for some in-kind, that someone's going to help to house the person who's going to be doing the work during phase 1 in terms of the contracting and working with legal to get the repairs done, some of those kinds of things. So they're hoping that they can keep those costs to a minimum.
So I had a question. I think in our prior discussion, we've acknowledged both a business argument for the locks operating and a tourism argument for the locks to operate, and seen as potential benefits to Wilsonville in both of those venues. If that is the case, what is the status of our hotel motel tax, and might it be used to help fund part of the rationale?
Sure. I mean, it goes into the general fund, so that's where we're taking this money out of, so.
Do we know how much excess? I mean, I thought we had to spend that on a tourism-related.
Well, a certain percentage of it, yeah.
Yeah. And so are we meeting that percentage now, or?
We're exceeding it, yeah.
We're exceeding it, all right.
Yes.
So it's all money, yeah. Councilor Lehan.
Yes, another thing to keep in mind, not exactly tied to this, but sort of, is Willamette Falls and Landings. And we have not, hitherto, we have not contributed as far as I know.
Correct. We've endorsed the creation of the National Heritage Area.
Exactly. And now I'm serving on that board, and as is Mr. Leo here, and and others. So we have upped our participation level when it moved to being Willamette Falls and Landings as opposed to Willamette Falls, because the area expanded on upriver here. So in the same venue, I mean, the same effort, that they are definitely linked. The Willamette Falls effort and the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area effort are definitely co-supporting each other, and now we're pretty deep into both of them. So it's a similar dollar amount that a lot of the cities in Willamette Falls and Landings are contributing, is in that 7,000 to 10,000 a year. So, I mean, it's another thing to think about putting in that tourism budget. That one entirely is entirely tourism. Willamette Falls and Landings.
Councilor Linville.
I believe, if I am not incorrect, that it is anticipated that after Phase 1, then the communities will not be asked to contribute beyond that point.
There'll be revenue generated through operation of the locks that will sustain the authority.
Cross your fingers.
That's the goal.
Projection or
That's
the
the
goal.
goal.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted just to say real quick is that we can agree to this, but we can't bind a future council. So we need to figure out a way to make sure that this consortium understands that it's only as good as the next budget cycle.
But we could pass an intent, kind of a
You sure could do that.
resolution for future years as well as authorizing the current
Yes,
year, right?
you could say at this point in time, at this date and time, this council wants to do this.
The other comment I guess I'd like to make is, while I don't think anyone on the commission can really speak for the legislature, but they're very optimistic about the reception that they have gotten. And the legislators that are on the commission are really working hard to make this happen. So I think the issue of the letters and the commitment at this point is really to forward that effort with the legislature to make that appear that those communities that are most impacted by the opening of the locks are in support.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious as to why Oregon City, which in my mind is a direct beneficiary, isn't contributing at the same level as Westland. Do we know?
No.
No.
The mayor of Westland is chairing, yeah.
Okay.
And apparently, Westland does have a very historic connection to the locks. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers used to have an office
That's my
in
question.
Westland.
Well, the locks are on that side of the river, but, you know.
Yeah.
The locks are Westland.
Yeah.
And I would mention similarly with the Willamette Falls and Landings, if they get the heritage area designation, then money from the federal government flows. Right now, they don't have that, so that's why they're always trying to raise money to keep their minimal staff operating. But hopefully, when money starts coming, if they get the designation, then they'll get some federal money on a regular basis that will go to activities all up and down the river.
So what do you need?
So basically, just really a head nod if we want to continue our $7,000 a year support and also produce letters of support to the commission and to the Joint Ways and Means Committee.
And are they asking for letters of support from the city council, from
Yes,
the
they
mayor,
are.
or from individual elected officials?
No, from the city council, from the city council.
So signed by the mayor on behalf of the council?
Correct.
Okay. So that would be the two asks.
Correct.
Continue with the current level of funding and a letter signed by the mayor
You got
on a
it.
motion from
All
council.
right, so would this take a resolution?
It seems like a head nod is fine.
I think a head nod is fine, as long as everybody on council's fine with the current level of commitment, and
We've
you're
had,
okay with
you
the
know,
mayor signing.
some years now that we've been talking about this and have backed their work, you know, at this level.
If you want to just dot i's and cross t's, under mayor's business, you can just simply say that you want to authorize
Yeah.
We're going to authorize the mayor to sign a letter of support, and we're, with the intent to continue the same level of funding that we're currently at for the next 2 years, 3 years.
They're seeking 3 to 5, so 3
Okay,
minimum.
But when you go back to the commission, you
Yes,
just need to make it clear.
Oh, yeah.
that we
I
can't
think that's
buy
true with all the local
Yeah,
governments.
It has had good public and business support
Yes.
Yeah.
historically. The idea of getting the locks open again.
So if you want me to, like, between this and that, I can come up with a.
Yeah, why don't you do that if you, is that the will of the council that we'd like to do that?
Okay.
I'm seeing affirmative, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, structural, energy, mechanical, residential, electrical, plumbing, and fire codes.
There's a mouthful.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Knapp. Amanda Guile Hinman, Assistant City Attorney.
Good evening, Mayor Knapp and members of the council. Dan Carlson, city's building official. It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Nice to have you.
Thank you. So we are here to talk about a number of changes to our Wilsonville Development Code, Chapter 9, namely. Essentially asking council to approve 2 resolutions. The first is the adoption of building codes through Resolution 2779, and then adoption of a fee schedule through 2780. And we're also intending to have a second reading tonight of our ordinance for a new Chapter 9 of Wilsonville Code through Ordinance 839. So let me get my presentation up here briefly. So for those who may not be privy to how we got where we are, I'll just cover very briefly for a bit of background. The State Building Codes Division recently adopted the 2019 Oregon Structural Specialty Code, the OSSC, as you see it in your staff report. At the same time, the state has advised local jurisdictions that 26 items are no longer included in the scope of the code that were previously. So this has caused each jurisdiction to adopt new administrative provisions in their local code to cover these items that the state has removed. And they've said that we can add back up to 20 items, and those are listed in your staff report as well. So Amanda and I are going to kind of tag team this for you. I'll let her take the first swing at this. We're really trying to highlight, to sort of break this down and simplify it, what is staying the same and then what is changing. So those are our 2 themes here.
So, thank you, Dan. So to start with, on our building fees, which is the Resolution 2780, those are going to stay the same. So they're the same as what's currently in Chapter 9 and what we currently administer. There is work that will be done to look at those fees in the future, but given the time constraints, that's not something that we're prepared to address at this time, so we're keeping that the same. In addition, the energy code, the Oregon State Energy Code, the mechanical code, the electrical code, and the plumbing code and the fire code are all staying the same. So there's no changes to them, we're just essentially re-adopting them in this new format that we've created through our new Chapter 9. So we're going to start with the changes. The first is to the residential specialty code, and these are relatively minor. We're essentially keeping the 2017 Oregon residential specialty code. We're adding 2 components to it. The first is with regard to the construction safeguards regarding fire safety. They are the same as what we are proposing to be added to the structural specialty code. This is obviously focused on residential housing. The second addition is Appendix Q of the 2018 International Residential Code, and that's per the Oregon Legislature adopting House Bill 2423. It's specifically related to small homes, tiny homes. So that is a requirement by the legislature to the State Building Codes Division, and thus to us as well as local jurisdictions that have to administer that code.
Okay, so then we have changes to the structural code, and this is where the bulk of our changes come in. So,
Brian, can you dim the light maybe a little bit? So that's.
I didn't choose that font, you did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So we have 20 items to consider, and staff suggests adding back 19 of the 20. The one item that we're not recommending that we add back is one that basically is a forced seismic rehabilitation of existing buildings. I've had a lot of experience with businesses and entities like Oregon State University where they will go in and voluntarily do seismic upgrades, and that really works pretty well right now with current codes. So that's a big difference between a mandate for existing buildings. 12 of the 19 items are already covered in the code with technical provisions or standards, and those are listed there. Sorry for the poor color on the font, but you can see those items there. We don't really have to do anything to the code other than readopt those items. We have two big issues to kind of cover here. One is dangerous buildings, and the other one is safety during construction. For dangerous buildings, I've had quite a bit of experience with dangerous structures, and we are recommending that we add back Oregon Structural Specialty Code Section 116, which is titled Unsafe Structures and Equipment. And also, because that section is short and very generalized, I'm really recommending that we add in some language to pull in the International Property Maintenance Code, 2018 versions. Just to give you a real quick story on that code, the International Property Maintenance Code comes from this code here. It's the 1997 Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings. This code no longer is published because the entity that published it is the International Council of Building Officials, and ICBO is commonly referred to. That organization merged with two other organizations, Southern and Boca, to form the International Code Council. Okay, so the International Code Council publishes all of our code books now. They have published this one, it's the International Property Maintenance Code, and they've basically taken the language out of this book and put it into this book. So that's the difference. That's kind of the backstory. It's very, very similar. What we are recommending is that we adopt some definitions, some very explicit or very specific sections from this code, because when you get into a dangerous building situation, you really want to have that well defined, especially when you get into a compliance issue where the person doesn't want to comply. And you have to then define it dangerous in order it to be repaired or abated. Most people don't go that route. Most people recognize the issue and they voluntarily comply, and it's all good. But I've had a couple of instances in my career where the definition, it comes down to a definition, and you really need a solid definition. So that's why we're leaning into this code. There are a couple of other jurisdictions that have adopted the entire code, Corvallis being one, as well as Gresham has adopted it for their housing maintenance code. The next big item is safety during construction. Catch up to my notes here. So basically, several of these items, 3 through 6 of the list of 20, were stripped out, and those are fire safety during construction, which you all know is very near and dear to our hearts here in Wilsonville because of our fire event that we had earlier this year. Demolition is also another topic that the state has stripped out, and protection of adjoining property. All of those things are, in my opinion, very important to maintaining a safe built environment and a safe structure. So we're adding those back. We're also, as you can see here in the last bullet, adopting several provisions relating to fire suppression, hydrants, extinguishers, standpipe systems, and fire department connections. Those are all things that the state pulled out, and for whatever reason, and we're adding it back in. One of the things that I would highlight, though, is you see the building there in the photo. That was the building that actually burned in Villebois prior to the fire, approximately 3 weeks prior to the fire. And you will see the major item, I think, that is missing is an actual construction fence around it. So the doors were wide open. Right here is a doorway that's open, and if you go around the back to where the alley is, all of the garage doors were wide open. And so no way to really make it difficult for somebody who might be intending some ill will or harm to that structure. So what you're going to see in the proposed code language, or what you should have seen in the staff report, is some language that I put together by gleaning from some other jurisdictions, and really just spending some time thinking through what is going to stand the best chance of really helping to prevent something like this from happening again from a security standpoint. And so we're proposing to add some form of security fencing or some sort of on-site security to really get at those issues. And then moving into the last part of this, is we have 3 other remaining items: grading, signs, and encroachments in the public right-of-way. Encroachments in the public right-of-way are things like balconies or basements, awnings, marquees. Sometimes they actually need to go out over the public right-of-way, and you need to have code language to deal with those items. Signs, we're proposing to adopt Appendix H of the Oregon Structural Specialty Code. And what we're trying to do is really dovetail this in with our sign code, which comes out of Wilsonville Code Section 4.156, and make those two work together. And then the last section is grading. We currently regulate grading by Appendix J. It's previously been adopted, and so we're readopting it, and then just tweaking it just a slight little bit in the area where it talks about what does and doesn't require a permit, to make it clearer that you do need a permit for these certain things. And so that's really it. That's it in a nutshell. Kind of fast, and hopefully the matrix that we provided in the staff report was sort of helpful to provide some explanation. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Councilor Linville.
Well, first of all, I want to say, what a good job. I mean, this was a big job, and I think the council was concerned about what do we do if we don't get this taken care of by January 1. So thank you for all the work in getting this completed. In the section that relates to safeguards during construction, and the area with the fencing, am I correct in understanding that this is for construction that is only for 4 or more stories, or 40 feet more than 40 feet in height?
Correct. So
it wouldn't be like residential housing?
It could be residential housing, but it would be a very, very limited application of residential housing. And item number 4, just to highlight where this is at, I'm on page 193 of your staff report. It's Exhibit 4, Section 3302.3.2, scope. Right. Item number 4 is really what gets at the residential housing. And it's not going to be like your individual standalone single-family house. This is going to be a series of townhouses that are 3 or more stories in height. There are 4 or more individual structures. They're combustible construction, so they're wood construction, not metal. And they don't have a separation, they're close together. So the fuel loading in that kind of scenario is such that we really need to do something to address that, to have some security fencing around it.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
And in most jurisdictions, they would treat that type of housing as multifamily housing, but we don't. We treat that generally as single-family attached housing. So that's why it's important for it to be both in the structural specialty code and the residential code.
Okay.
And so I realize under construction is different, but eventually would those things be sprinklered?
that are,
In most
that many
cases,
stories,
in all
they're
likelihood, yes.
Yeah.
In our current codes, multifamily structures are required to be sprinklered.
Yeah. So that's the other importance of this, is that during construction, the sprinkler system is not there yet.
Correct.
So it's vulnerable because it's
Correct.
been installed.
Other questions?
I had a question, if you're, on the sections that where you said that were out and we've added back in, and made specific to our situation in some cases, but how would a builder be made aware of that if ours is unique to Wilsonville in some way or different than Tualatin or Oregon
Sure,
City?
that's a great question. What's typically the process would be that they would come in and they would submit their permit application. But even prior to that, they would meet with us through a pre-development meeting. And that pre-development meeting is the point of time at which that's communicated to a developer or to a builder. And then
We would point out.
we would bring it up, absolutely.
That this and this are unique to Wilsonville.
Yes, and you know.
Could be different than what you've done before.
The other thing, we use our website a lot as a go-to resource for people to direct them. Here's some information that's specific to Wilsonville. We take calls and questions all the time. Staff is really good about meeting with them early and often, and as many times as they want. So we would definitely take advantage of those opportunities to inform folks that this is something unique to Wilsonville. And I do have to say, I've had other jurisdictions reach out to me about this language, and they're interested in adopting this on their own. So we'll see where that goes. But it's definitely an issue. They just had one last week or a week before that burned down in New York, actually. It was a retirement facility, very similar to what we had, only it was a 5-story structure.
Under construction.
Under construction, yeah. So, other questions?
Councilor Ackerman.
Just kind of wanted to echo some of the comments of thanks and appreciation for how you've responded to this. And it does feel that being able to include this section is kind of our silver lining in being thrown a tremendous amount of work here at the end of the year to work with. But I'm very glad to see that, be able to be part of the revisions that we're making, and appreciate having something that to my understanding, it feels like we can be protected in having the authority now, right, to be enforcing this, and we're trying to be complete in what we're putting out there as our code, and not just the description of it, but also our ability to enforce it going forward. So that's really important. That's great. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
I wanted to ask, Exhibit 2 on page 191 of 301, adopting the 2019 Oregon Zero Energy Ready Commercial Code, which I have no idea what that is.
How the state comes up with these names, I don't know. That is a state name, the name of the new state-adopted commercial energy code. That's what we call it. So we're simply adopting that code straight out. It is something we don't really have a choice on the matter. So if I could rename it, I would certainly.
Yeah. Has anybody read it to see if there's any real surprises in it yet?
There's lots of surprises.
A lot. Oh, good.
Sorry. One of the big surprises for us as staff is we're essentially having to learn a brand new code.
Yeah.
It is not the International Energy Conservation Code. It is it's an ASHRAE standard, ASHRAE B 90.1, and it's a 2016 version, which is supposed to be a higher level of energy code than the International Energy Conservation Code, which the rest of the world is moving toward. So not only that, but we've heard directly from the Building Codes Division Administrator that next year they intend to bump it from the 2016 version to the 2019 version. So we are on a fast track for very restrictive.
But we're adopting the 2019.
2016.
We're adopting the 2019 by title. Embedded in it is
Is the
the
2016.
2016 version. Yeah,
And then when 2019 comes out, we would adopt that.
correct. And actually, the state would adopt it, so we would
Yeah.
adopt it by virtue of this.
Okay, I just also wanted to add my thanks for the couple hours that each of you spent in time with me going through the Chapter 9 stuff and looking at different perspectives on some of the language in there and then making fairly significant change, what I think are fairly significant changes along the way where appropriate, resulting in what we're calling, I guess, the redlined copy of the Chapter 9 that is now attached to tonight's second reading of that and will be the version that we are proposing to adopt tonight. So thank you for all of that work. I think from my perspective, it made it much better. So, anything else?
If I could add just one
Yes,
more
absolutely.
thing. I really want to thank my colleague Amanda for the amazing work that she did while I was out. Due to a medical issue, she stepped up and just tackled this thing head on. It was a great team effort. Fortunately, I can work a little remotely and get this thing done. So it was kind of fun, right?
Yeah, I just appreciate that you were still responding to emails. I said a lot.
So if she ever gets tired of being an attorney, she can, try to get licensed as a building official, right?
Yeah, watch out, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're doing pretty good here tonight on time, I think.
We are.
So we have the bylaws for the Kitakata Sister City Organization next up.
Well, Erica is coming up here. I just want to give you a little background on the bylaws, because I did receive a lot of questions from a couple of you. So what I want you to know is the bylaws are basically we pulled them from another city, right? We tweaked them a little bit, took them to the board just so that they could get a look at them, make sure there's some comfort level there. I don't think they had a great deal of questions about the technical aspects of the bylaws at all. I think they're just relieved that the city's going to step in and have a role. So what I wanted you to know, there's going to be some changes between what you have here and what will end up at the next council meeting. Now, there are some questions about whether or not you want to do term limits, because a lot of our other boards and commissions do have term limits. This might be one that you might want to treat a little differently. I would think that the Tourism Promotion Commission is another one, because we have a hard time keeping people on that committee. So it's just something that you'll want to debate and discuss. We'll bring language either way, if you want them or if you don't want them. There's some language cleanup that we're going to be doing as well. So I got your questions, I got the mayor's questions. So if you have questions after the meeting, just send them to me and I'll work with Erica and we'll make sure that we bring back options for you in terms of some of those questions you've asked. And with that, I will turn it over to Erica.
Thank you for the great disclaimer. I'm Erica Baylor, Recreation Coordinator, and my boss is here for moral support. So I was here in September just to kind of give a briefing about the status of the Wilsonville Sister City Association, how they're kind of seeking city support, just kind of things that seem unsustainable at this point to continue as a group of volunteers. So I've put together just, again, a sample set of bylaws that were adopted. We looked at these from the city of Beaverton specifically, and then also just this brief kind of outlined budget of what we spent or what the association spent during the last student delegation to Wilsonville this last October. And that's just kind of laid out here. And then the second sheet that was in your notes was just the portions highlighted in yellow were just ideas of maybe what we'd like to cover moving forward versus having Kitakata, for example, cover those costs. So I think tonight is really just to kind of open the conversation for me to receive your feedback moving forward and yeah, just know how to be directed with our next couple steps here.
And one of the questions I think Councilor Akkerval asked, I believe it was you that asked about training.
Yeah.
Yeah, so assuming the council adopts the bylaws and we move in this direction, then that would be the first order of business, is to work with that committee to develop a work plan, probably a 2-year work plan since they're new, and then also give them the requisite training from our legal department on what they should and should not do, how they should conduct meetings, et cetera. So that will all be provided at the front end.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and a facilitator too, I think was discussed.
Yeah, I think we used the facilitator for the Parks and Rec Board to help
Correct.
them out a little bit as well.
And this, yeah, and the same one we're using for the task force right
For
now.
the task force, yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So conceptually, there's a couple of things I think merit discussion by council. What has been the financial history of this group as to where does the money come from that they have functioned with over the past few years? And how, if it does change, is it proposed to change under this structure?
Yeah, so I think for the last couple of years, at least the year and a half that I've been involved, they've been using grant money that they were awarded, I believe, in 2017. And then they've also received a number of donations, which is a little embarrassing to say, from Kitakata. So they have been giving our city or the association money to run the program as well.
To pay for the bus.
To pay for the bus, things like that. This past year, we kind of fronted the money for a number of things. We, meaning we had some money in the Parks and Rec budget to pay for the bus up front, but then got reimbursed for those things. Other than that, they really try to utilize pretty, like a potluck dinner. They try to keep the budget pretty low. But as far as I'm aware, they've been funded off of grant money and donations.
Grant money from the city,
From the Community Opportunity Grant.
not from outside grants.
Right,
Well, except for their potlucks and stuff that they were doing.
right.
Low dollar fundraisers.
So I had the opportunity to go to Kitakata in 2013, I can't remember.
I think it was 13.
And it's striking how robustly their business community supports this operation on that end. The communications that I got made it clear that the business community there feels like if their kids are going to be successful in the world as they grow up, they need to have a perspective on other societies and other countries, and that America is certainly high on that list, and that they see this really as an educational obligation that they have to their children. And on this end, it strikes me how different it has been perceived on this end. And I'm not aware of any efforts to engage the broader business community or to find backing of that type. And one of the questions I have is this just, it's easy to let the city fund it all, so we'll just let the city do that? Or is there any reasonable approach to urging them to find broader support in the community?
I would think that would be, I think now that they would have assuming, again, I'm not going to presume that you're going to approve this, but if you did, what they would have now that they haven't had before is a staff person to take care of all the minutia, the day-to-day, so that they could get out and do some of that fundraising in the business community. I would think that that's something that Erica could work with the board on, to say, we want to have a plan of raising X number of dollars per year to help fund the program so that the city's not 100% funding. Those are all things that can be worked out with staff and the board so that they would be freed up, they would have the time to do that.
All right, so should any of that expectation, if that were the case, be embedded in the bylaw?
I don't know that you would, unless you want to say explicitly that you have to raise 50% of the program funding, or something to that effect, is you don't want to put in bylaws what can't be accomplished.
No.
If you want to put some encouraging language in there, we could certainly do
Yeah,
that.
I don't know about a dollar amount, because that's going to change over the environment and the economy and everything else year by year, but it seems to me like having some discussion maybe under the budget
I think
section that there is an expectation that a certain amount of, or something, however it would
we
be
could put
appropriately
that
worded.
under like duties of the board. We could say that one of the duties of the board is to conduct fundraising. We could also put a whereas clause in the resolution stating that it's the council's desire that the board, be active in the business community and raise funds. So
Yeah.
if that's important to the council, we can certainly include that language.
Okay. Councilor Linville.
I just have a question because of my, just not being familiar enough with the program. But is it an exchange where we actually send our students there, or are we just hosting?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of evolved over the years. It used to be strictly students at the high school that were in the Japanese language program would get the opportunity to grow. As that program may have seen some decline over the years, I think they've opened it to any high school kind of junior or senior that wants to go or has an interest to go. But it's interesting right now, that portion of the program, the Sister C Association doesn't have a huge hand in that. It's mostly the school district doing that with a little bit of a nudge from the Wilsonville Sister City Association, just kind of, helping boost that program. And that would be something that would be up for discussion if this were to become, I think, a board, maybe what larger role we might have in our students going over there as well. not
But
just
ours have gone every other year?
Yes, every other year.
So
yeah.
we've kind of alternated so that their students would come one year and then our students would go the second year. And that's been pretty reliable, however it's happened or however it's been caused to happen. It's been pretty consistent.
I asked that question mostly because it doesn't appear in the budget that there are any funds that are set aside for students that go. It's just mostly for the hosting that we do of those students when they come here.
I think
Is that
families have
correct?
had to pay for their own student,
Yeah.
the cost of sending their students.
So it makes me wonder, I understand how important it is for parents and businesses to contribute to sending their students. I just wonder if there is that cultural benefit that our business would see in the hosting side of it versus the sending part. So, well, I think that there are opportunities to do fundraising. I think it probably needs to be pretty clear that it's, if it's for the hosting events.
So the other thing that, I also think is important is the question on term limits. And we've got a scenario currently where essentially 4 people, 2 couples have been the total officers' membership for year after year after year. And there have been opportunities for other people to become engaged, but they became somewhat discouraged from participating because it didn't seem like they were really having a lot of influence, I guess is what I would say. So I think it's important that we develop some kind of a structure that allows an evolution of the guidance of the organization over time to include new people that come along. At the high school level, someone comes in as a freshman or a sophomore, gets interested in Japanese, their parents should have an opportunity then, if it's their priority, to participate in this organization. And I'm worried that without some sort of defined terms that may not hold true.
Well, like I said, we'll give you options both ways if you decide that that's important for you. I mean, there's arguments for and against term limits for this specific commission, but I think it's up to what you want. I mean, we'll give you language for both.
And I will just say it has been really encouraging. There have been 2 sisters that got to go to Japan when they were in high school. Ashley Summerlin is one of them, who has been at every board or every association meeting that I've been at since I started with it about a year and a half ago. And she actually got to go with us to Japan this last October. Her sister has gotten involved. One of the Japanese teachers, now retired, has gotten involved. So it has been, I will say, encouraging to see kind of the new blood come through. And then there have been some host family parents who have expressed interest as well.
So there may be demand that we're not aware of, too.
Councilor Leahy?
One thing I know a number of nonprofits do is have their board be a range instead of a specific number. And certainly our Cemetery Association is like that. It's a range of, I can't remember what it is, 5 to 9 or something. So that we are usually below the top number, so that if somebody comes forward that is an opportunity to bring on, you can do that without kicking somebody off.
That would make perfect sense for this commission.
And then your quorum's just based on the 5?
Or you
Whoever
just
the
say your
seated
quorum's
members are.
based on on the majority of whatever the number.
So no fewer than 5 members, no more than 9, something like that.
Yeah. It has given us a lot of flexibility
That makes sense.
when that special person just shows up. And a lot of boards, nonprofit boards that need to do a lot of fundraising do that in case an important person shows up who has a lot of connections or money, and you would like to put them on the board. You don't want to say, well, come back next year, why don't you?
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That's great.
The other thing is, I know you can't, it's limiting to require, but sometimes you might want to encourage or, say, have a goal be for one of the members to be connected with the school or
Or the business community.
Yeah, to target a couple of things that our goal is to include at least one person from our business community or the chamber and one person from the school district amongst our community members or something.
That's kind of how the Tourism Promotion Committee is set up as well.
Yeah. You can't, you don't always have the opportunity to get the pieces you want, but it's your goal to look for.
Okay.
That's great.
Councilor Akeball?
I like both of those suggestions. I think those are great suggestions. I think, speaking as somebody that's been an exchange student myself, once, I think my initial experience was when I was a middle schooler and I went to Japan, to Wariyama, Japan. And your perception of the world as a middle schooler at that age, is very different than when you become an adult. But reflecting back on what you remember from the trips and from the interactions and stuff, I think what an exchange program gives you that you don't get in normal travel is the interactions with personal families and ability to do kind of more the mundane or the everyday, that you don't get that little snapshot into lives. And, talking about having a representative from a business or involvement with the business community. I mean, I remember going on several different tours of businesses or things like that. And you don't have those opportunities when you're traveling yourself to go on a factory tour or, you don't seek that sort of thing out always. And it ends up being memorable and kind of rich part of your experience and understanding of what the day-to-day is. So I think opportunities to encourage that both as a experience for students that are coming here and students that are going there. I think that's a great benefit of having a exchange program, and it's maybe not something that's valued initially by a student, but later on in life, it's something that can strike memories that you really appreciate. Yeah.
And I just want to say on the budget side, that's something that will be developed every year and presented to the budget committee and then to the council for approval. And so I would see that budget going up and down based on, whether we're going to or they're coming here. But certainly we wouldn't include travel for anyone without council's approval. So it's not the goal of the program to fund travel for the board. So we made that clear. So if that's going to happen, they would have to travel on their own dime, or we'd have to do some fundraising through that committee.
Well, just in context to Councilor Akval's comment about being a middle schooler, the fact that Kitakata has been a sake brewing center for some 400 years. So yes, you can go to the sake factory, but that may not be what you're doing. It's also that region, one of the recognized ramen noodle manufacturing highlights. And so that's a lot more fun. They've got noodle restaurants where you go and they just have all your different ramen soup served in a bowl about this.
Was it 2 summers ago that they had the huge delegation?
That came here? Yeah, that was in
2000. It was a 2018.
the 30th.
30th.
They had their
anniversary,
entire
yeah.
city council come, didn't they?
Yeah, big chunk of the business
And
community.
I think they're expecting much the same for us to.
Yeah, when we went in November, it was like, the good old boys, there they were.
Yeah.
It was, I recognized them from when they were here, and we got to do the ramen and the sake and everything you're describing, and that's pretty special.
All right, anything else that you need from council at this point?
I have your comments, Councilor Lehan's comments, so if anybody else has anything they want to add, we'll just bring it all in the form of a cafeteria of recommendations, and you can pick and choose.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
I did think of a counselor concern
Yeah,
that I didn't think of before.
The door's closed.
no concerns. Please, go ahead.
Yes, about our silverware.
It comes with the catering.
I know, but this just seems really a shame. I have a sandwich, a cookie, and a bag of chips. And the sandwich is entirely made, and I don't have any mayonnaise or anything. And I have a whole package of brand-new silverware, which goes right in the trash.
I think we can ask them not to send us anymore.
Can we recycle the silverware so that it's used?
Yeah, we can.
Used
We
here in
pulled it out of the
the staff?
dishwasher. We do rewash the plastic
Yeah.
and stuff, so we'll reuse it.
But, I mean, I bet we're throwing a lot of silverware away.
Yeah.
Because,
I agree. Plastic is a menace.
yeah, either they shouldn't send it. It comes in a package with a napkin, but then we always have a pile of napkins.
Yeah, so you don't have to unwrap it even.
Yeah, so we don't need the cellophane or this or the napkin, even though it's very pleasant.
But we can donate that back to
Yeah,
the
see,
city.
Sure, yeah, we'll
here's what
take
it
those.
looks like. And,
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah.
In its native habitat.
yes, before you opened it up, I took out the napkin, which I shouldn't have done, but there it is.
Okay, is that it?
Yes, sir.
That's it? All right, let's call us adjourned at 6:50, what, 3? And
you do with your
we're
30
not
minutes?
scheduled downstairs till 7:30? Is
We
that right?
thought the rate making would take longer.